Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Tuckfield. I'm the chairman of the Macomb Township Zoning Board of Appeals, and I'm calling this regularly scheduled meeting to order on December the 5th at 6:30 p.m. Please stand with me for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Our secretary is not present this evening, so I'm going to call the roll call for item 3. Mr. DeCoster.
Here.
Ms. Faustick.
Here.
Mr. Mazzara.
Here.
Mr. Piper.
Here.
Mr. Tuckfield is here. Mr. DeBruin is absent and excused. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to excuse Mr. DeBruin from any roll call votes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that a motion.
Motion by Mr. Piper. Is there support?
I'll support it.
Supported by Mr. Mazzara. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries. Next on our agenda, actually I should mention with the roll call that we are at full strength tonight. I believe our bylaws do refer to how many we can operate with. And with regards to alternates and regular members, we are at full strength and we have no restrictions, I believe, on our voting tonight because we are 4 and 1. It's going to take us on to addressing any conflicts of interest. At this time, I'm going to call the roll again, and if there's any conflicts on any of the items this evening, please signify by saying yes, and if you have no conflicts, please signify by saying no. Mr. Piper?
No.
Mr. Mazzara?
No.
Mr. Tuckfield says no. Ms. Faustick?
No.
Mr. DeCoster?
No.
All right, having stated that none of us have any conflicts of interest on tonight's agenda items, that will move us on to item 5, which is the approval of tonight's agenda. Is there any motions for approval?
I'll motion to approve.
All right, motion by Mr. Mazzara. Is there support?
I will second that.
Supported by Mr. Piper. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries and the agenda is adopted. The next item on the agenda is the approval of our last meeting's minutes, which would be the meeting for Thursday, November the 7th. Is there any discussion or motions on this item? Hearing none, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for Thursday, November the 7th as presented. Is there support?
Support.
Supported by Mr. DeCoster. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries and the previous meeting minutes are adopted. All right, that takes us on to item 7, which is old business. 7A, which is a request to vary from section 10.1603B33A in 2 different elements for permanent parcel 0836452-002. Could you take us through this?
Thank you. So the first old business item is in reference to a commercial property on the northwest corner of the intersection at Hall Road and Gratiot Avenue. A proposed Sheetz gas station has been applied for and received by the township. So the petitioner has applied for a variance to allow for a drive-through call box at a closer separation distance from the north and west residential properties. Since the application was formally supplied to the township, the petitioner has actually formally withdrawn the request. So at this time, there is no formal action needed by the zoning board, and there is no necessity for a public hearing.
All right, very good. Just to check with our legal counsel, do we just pass on this item? Do we have to vote to accept do we have to do anything specific here?
Nope, the application's been withdrawn, no discussion or motion needs to be made.
Okay, very good. Well, then I'll say that item 7A, then, that business is closed, and I will move us on to item 8, which is new business. Item 8A is several requests. These will be sign exceptions, so it's referring to section 20-9C1, C2A, and C2B. This would be for permanent parcel 08141000011. Ms. Galvazi, if you could again, please take us through this.
Thank you. So this request is for 3 sign exceptions. The affected property is the Hartford Communities Residential Planned Unit Development on the southeast corner of the intersection at Card Road and 24 Mile Road. The sign exceptions are requested to allow for the replacement of an existing sign within the Boulevard Island on the south side of 24 Mile Road, as you can see in that aerial provided on the slide in front of you. The first sign exception is to allow for the sign to be located within that boulevard island. The second is for the sign to be located 6 feet from the 24-mile road right-of-way when 10 feet is technically required. And the third sign exception request is to allow for the sign to be located 9.5 feet from the Ansonia Way rights-of-way to the west and the east. Again, 10 feet is required on both of those. I'm sure as you're all familiar, we've gotten quite a few sign exception requests over the past few months. Sign exceptions are different than a typical variance request, and so you can see in the bullet points there is no need for a practical difficulty or hardship to be demonstrated. The zoning board can consider a different set of standards in considering the exception request, and we'll go over those in the next few slides. And lastly, in any motion granting or denying any of the exceptions, the zoning board shall state the specific grounds for the decision, and it shall be supported by specific findings of fact. You do also have the ability to attach any conditions if you find that necessary or reasonable. So I won't read through this whole slide, it's a lot of text, but there are 7 exception standards that you are able to consider for these 3 sign exceptions. The first is in relation to obstructions, visibility, site features, scale, aesthetics, minimal, so that's whether the request would be the minimum necessary to allow for reasonable use, visibility, or readability of the sign. And lastly is intent. So would the intent and purpose of the Signs and Signs Regulations ordinance be impaired by the request? So this slide is just an image of the street view and an aerial view as provided in the application package by the petitioner of the existing conditions of the sign. And just for comparison, you can see the location is not changing as proposed, but the aesthetics of the signs are changing. I'll kind of scroll back and forth. The overall sign size appears to remain the same as well. So the departments have had a chance to review the proposal, and their findings are as presented. So the building department has noted that the detail of the sign shows a base with a height of 24 inches. Technically, per township ordinance, the maximum allowed base height is 18 inches. And they've noted that it appears the sign will be in a clear vision area, so it would be obstructing that clear vision zone. Engineering has stated that there is no objection because the new sign will be placed in the same location essentially as the existing sign, and Fire and Public Works have no comments and no objections to the requests. The Planning Department has offered a few considerations in relation to those sign exception standards we went over a few slides ago. So first is regarding site features. The request is being made, again, to replace an existing site entry sign. So construction of a conforming sign would alter the existing aesthetics of this point of access into the Hartford community's development. Second, regarding aesthetics, again, to replace an existing sign, that's why these exceptions are being requested. If approved, the exception would allow for the site to maintain its current visibility and aesthetics. Therefore, the appearance of the neighborhood will not be adversely impacted. Regarding minimal, the applicant may provide additional information as to whether the requested exception is in fact the minimum necessary to replace the existing sign. And lastly is regarding intent. So the intent of this ordinance is to allow for visibility while minimizing harmful effects and protecting the public health, safety, and welfare and aesthetic beauty of the township. The requested exceptions will allow for the replacement of an existing sign and to maintain existing visibility from both of the roadways. Overall, staff don't have any objection to the sign being located as proposed. We do defer to the applicant if they'd like to explain why the base would need a height that is greater than is allowed by ordinance.
All right, very good. I appreciate that. Is there any questions for the planning department from the board?
One quick question. You're saying the base of the sign, so it looks like the sign itself is about the same height, but it's
Correct.
the base that's larger than the old one. Okay, thank you.
I do have one question as
Go
well.
ahead, Dave.
Is this, has there been any variances approved for this site before with regards to the construction of this sign, or is it just a non-conforming?
I don't believe so. There are quite a few instances in the township where signs have been located within the Boulevard Island. I believe in the past few years that's been changed by our ordinance and the county as well. So it's just something that was pre-existing.
I had one question with regards to that base. if we grant these sign exceptions, is it granting a variance or an exception to the base? It doesn't appear to be something that they're asking for, so does that restrict, or should we be taking that into consideration tonight? Is it applicable to what we're looking at?
I would defer to Jeff if he has any insight as to how we should approach that. Overall, I think the entire area of the sign is not changing, and so that's why they're requesting that base height, but again, I would defer to Jeff.
I believe that would be a sign exception as well that should be requested. I'm sure the applicant can clarify it, but I'm guessing they probably didn't know that that was in violation, so it wasn't part of the application. But that would require its own sign exception, since it doesn't comply with the ordinance. I don't think that prevents you from making a decision on the 3 requests before you tonight, but that would,
But it might require something additional.
exactly, that might be a condition that the board could consider.
Okay. All right, very good. With that in mind, is the applicant or the applicant's representative in the audience? If yes, please come forward to the table here. You might have to move the microphone so you can speak into it. State your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have. You should be able to just rotate it, and then it's flexible to bend up, so it's a little more, yeah.
Good evening. My name's Molly Smith, and I work for Signs and More, and we are working on behalf of Hartford Communities for their signage. And the base, our intent
And
was
if
to...
you could, ma'am, if I could just have you pull the microphone a little bit
Okay.
closer. Just we want to make sure that we can hear it for the record.
Okay. Our intent was to replace the same footprint and height of what they had previously. When we first began to work with designing the sign, our goal first was to take the word Hartford and make sure it was that the lettering was the same size or equivalent to what the Aberdeen sign had, and ensure the visibility. It worked, and we were able to keep the same footprint. If you look at their main entrance, there are 3 entrances within this community. The main entrance has a brick structure out there, and the brick is about 22 inches tall. And so this does mimic another entrance that is in the community, and that is why we just kept with the same. We didn't think it was an exception, and we would have requested the variance along with the submittal if we thought we needed to, or the request.
Okay. Very good. Do you have any other comments?
No?
All right, very good. Is there any questions from the board to the applicant? Hearing none and with no objection, I would open up this to public comment. If there's anyone in the public who wishes to make a question or statement on this, please come forward to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and give any comments you might have. Seeing none and without objection, I'm going to close the public comments and bring it back to the board for any comments or questions.
I do have one.
Go ahead, Mr. Coster.
Is there any reason why you can't move it back the 10 feet off of 24 Mile? I think that's my biggest hangup for the vision. Are you trying to use the existing footing? Is that why you're not doing that?
When you're out at the site and you're making approach, there are trees, there's lines of trees that do block the visibility, and just inching it up, keeping it where it is, really does make a difference in the timing of when you see the sign.
Any other questions? To our legal counsel, so in this case, if with the base, are they able to ask for an additional exception, I'll say on the fly, or is this something that we would have to look at a different time?
I think for notice purposes, it would have to be another time.
Okay,
Practically, that seems a little silly, but I think to follow the intent of the notice provisions, that would make sense.
okay. So in this case, we can hear the the three that are tonight, and if they were granted, the applicant could either request for the fourth one or maybe modify their drawing to meet with the criteria, whichever they chose to do, and come back at that point if they needed to.
That'd be correct.
Okay, all right. And you understand that, what we're talking through?
So what you're saying is administratively, if we did decide to reduce the sign height, it could be processed through the permit.
I believe we're specifically,
have to
they're
go to
referring
another-
to the base. So in this case, I believe the base, the stone base is at, I'm gonna say it's 22 inches, I don't remember the exact dimension, but that's above our ordinance's height.
Right.
So that was comments from staff, was that also does not meet the ordinance. And what our legal counsel has indicated is that we can't add it on as a request tonight because of noticing. So we can still look at the items you have, and if we were to pass them, you could either then choose to lower the base, so it would be in
Okay.
compliance, or you could submit another request and it would come back.
Okay.
With that in mind, I do also want to give you the opportunity. We could listen to all three of these tonight. This is also something that if you wanted to table to another time, if you wanted to do four at once, that's also something that we could entertain. I have I don't necessarily have advice or preference on those, but I wanted to make sure, since we're talking about multiple there, that you understood that and have the ability to do that if you wanted to.
I think that our preference is to have the 3 items approved tonight, and the community is having another meeting in December, and we can let them make a decision on this 4th, on the base then, and if we need to come back, we will do that.
Okay, very good. I appreciate it, and thanks for clarifying that. All right, with that, I will bring it back to the board for any questions, comments, or motions.
I just have one, maybe for the staff. If they're at a table, can they add an exception without having to pay again? Because if they go through tonight, they'll have to reapply and pay the fees, I'm assuming, to get back on the next agenda, correct?
Yeah, it would be if we approve this tonight and they decided to proceed with another variance, they would have to pay a fee and.
So if their decision is to request a tabling, could they add in the exception for the base without having to do that and just get on the next agenda?
We would probably let them do it.
Okay.
But, keep in mind where we're at in December and where the January meeting would be. We probably wouldn't be able to
Wouldn't
get the
be till
notice out,
February.
so this is, be looking at February probably
Okay.
before this would come back.
Yeah, I would want it at our next
Yeah.
scheduled meeting, not, but that just,
And to the applicant, you're following what's being referenced as far as the cost of reapplying? Sorry, and I hate to bring you back up, but if you come back up, I just want to make sure that we have this on the same page, so we're not causing ourselves any problem. So Mr. DeCoster's question was with regards to cost. So if we were to table this tonight, Mr. Van Tifflin has indicated that we probably could add another exception on without causing another refiling fee. Whereas if we looked at these tonight and approved or denied them and you came back for another one, you'd have to pay another resubmittal. And so we just want to make sure, again, not pushing you to do anything, just want to make sure you're aware of that. If you were to come back, you would have to pay another application fee for another sign exception.
So if they want to keep the height where it
Correct,
is.
yes.
If you lower, the homeowner is here, and he's asking if we lower the base, can we make the sign bigger?
I'm not familiar enough with the sign ordinance on that. I guess I would defer to Melissa or Jim.
Yeah, we'd have to check the square footage
Okay.
of the sign. The height isn't the issue, it
the
does
square
it exceed
footage.
the square footage that's in the ordinance.
Right.
So
It's possible, it's just a matter of, we can't, look at that right now and see what that square footage is gonna be.
And I think that's what Mr. Van Tifflin is indicating, is that he would have to go back and he would have to check. That's
So
not something that we will calculate.
Yeah, if we're talking about changing the design of the sign, I'd say that we don't seek the approval of the 3 items tonight.
Okay.
Because we're going to have to come back with another presentation, and I don't want to have them incur additional cost. It sounds like we're going to have to work a little more with the design and with the city, with the township, to finalize what's needed.
Okay. And Melissa, you're okay with that? I know I've kind of run through this without checking with you. You're okay with that
Okay,
process?
yeah, I think that's acceptable.
Okay, sounds good. And Jeff, you're good with that?
Yep.
Okay.
And just confirm, as of right now, there's no items on the January meeting?
Yeah, but that's what Jim was saying, is that with meeting notices, it likely would be February.
Okay, so if I was to make a motion, if the recommendation is to table it, I'd be making a motion for the, because we have to
I'm-
reference a meeting, right?
February meeting.
So the February meeting it would be.
I'm getting some other feedback here that,
I think what we'll do, if we could, is I'm going to table within the meeting this motion. I'm going to ask for a tabling. We'll address, we have one other item. We'll address the other item, and we'll come back to you. It'll probably be another 15, 20 minutes. That'll give you guys a chance, if you want to talk about it, as long as you're good with that, give you a
Yeah.
chance to talk about it, make a call if you need to, and then we can make a decision.
Okay.
It's I guess, a relatively minor thing. I just don't want to push you guys into doing something that's going to cause you some technical details.
Right.
So, and if that's okay with you, then I would entertain a motion to, this would technically be a tabling. We would put it on the table until later in the meeting when we can take it back off the table to address it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will make that motion to table it
All right.
temporarily.
Motion by Mr. Piper to table this item within the meeting. Is there support?
I'll support it.
Supported by Mr. Mazzara. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. Very good. That is tabled, and we'll address the next item and then come back to this one. All right. That takes us on to item 8B, which is a variance request from section 10.1805B2. This is with regards to a building height, and this is for permanent parcel 083230018. Melissa, could you take us through it?
Thank you. So this request is item 8B on the agenda for Mr. Car Wash. The affected site is currently undeveloped, and it's located on the north side of Hall Road and west of Garfield Road. The site is currently zoned as C4 Commercial Highway, and so it is subject to the height standards of that zoning district. That zoning district allows a maximum building height of 2 stories and 25 feet tall. As proposed, you can see that a portion of the building would be exceeding the 25-foot height maximum, so the area that is outlined in like the blue dashed, and they are actually requesting an overall height of 35 foot for those 2 towers. So the departments have provided their reviews. Assessing has identified that survey sketch dimensions within the application package do not match the printed legal description. The building department has indicated that the height increase as requested does not create any building code issues. The engineering department has stated that no practical difficulty was provided. However, generally, no engineering-related concerns are posed. And our fire department and public works department have provided no comments and no issues associated with the request. The planning department has provided a few bullets. The application package states that the request is being made to maintain the company's prototypical architectural design, and there don't appear to be any unique physical characteristics related to the property that would render conformance with the ordinance unnecessarily burdensome. Staff cannot identify any unique characteristics that are associated with the property that would necessitate a grant of the request. And additionally, it would appear that in granting a variance here, it would provide the applicant with greater relief than other property owners in the same district. The applicant may provide additional information regarding whether the spirit of the ordinance would be observed and public safety and welfare would be secured. Overall, staff would defer to the applicant to identify a practical difficulty before we can provide any further recommendation.
All right, any questions for the planning department on this item? I did have one. Melissa, I think this was recently rezoned.
Correct.
Was this a conditional rezoning?
Yes.
And it was a conditional rezoning from
From
C2
C3.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
C4 to C3.
yes, okay.
C4
to
to
C3.
to
No,
C3.
C3 to C4?
C4.
Jim.
Make sure we're on the same page. Okay.
We are now.
But and the conditional rezoning was sought by the now owner of the property.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Very good. If the applicant is in the audience, if you come forward to the center podium here, state your name and address for the record, and give any comments you might have.
My name is Jamie Antonevich, representing Mr. Car Wash, 12745 23 Mile, Shelby Township.
Do you have any comments for us this evening?
Yeah, you touched on one thing I was going to mention, the rezoning. Prior to that, the township contemplated this exact height for that zoning, so we aren't requesting a height that wasn't anticipated for that area of the township. As far as practical difficulties, we do have a fairly wide county drain on the south side of the property, as well as floodplain that is pushing the building, further back from Hall Road than maybe some other properties up and along Hall Road. Look, that extra height provides some additional ability to have someone catch the building, as they're driving along Hall Road.
All right, very good. Is there any questions to the applicant from the board? Hearing none, and without objection, I would open this up to the public. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this request? Seeing none, without objection, I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back to the board. Melissa, could you describe to us a little bit why someone might seek a conditional rezoning? I know obviously that's more of a planning commission board thing, but I think it's pertinent for this discussion. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have two types of rezonings that are available for petitioners to pursue. We have a standard rezoning, and we have a conditional rezoning. So standard rezonings are those that a petitioner might see that staff could support because it aligns with the intent of the master plan and the future land use map associated with the master plan. A conditional rezoning is typically pursued by an applicant when the master plan does not align with what they are requesting. In this case, the original C3 zoning would have required special land use for a car wash use. And so I believe that was the intent to pursue the C4 zoning because that would allow for that use by right. But in that change, that obviously changed the height limitations. And so originally, I believe it mentioned in the application package that the permitted height at that time would have allowed for the 35-foot. But in rezoning it conditionally, that wasn't maybe not considered. And so the height was then reduced down to 25 foot. And so that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, very good. And I would just comment to the rest of the board, from my perspective, from the Planning Commission, one of the things that when we get conditional rezonings, typically they want to do something that maybe is not normal or standard for that area, and so they will put essentially additional restrictions on the site. So in this case, Melissa indicated maybe they wanted to put a car wash in, and so they requested a rezoning. Perhaps part of it was that, and I don't remember the case altogether, but they asked for a less dense zone, but the ability to give themselves more flexibility on that site. So with relation to, I think, some of the points that the applicant has made, I think it's pertinent to point that out, and the fact that in this case there was specifically a less intense zone given. To me, I don't find the previous zone to be very applicable to this request, just because it was specifically asked to be moved away from for other reasons. So just a comment, and that was part of why I wanted to make sure that we talked through conditional rezoning a little bit. All right, is there any other questions, comments, or motions from the board?
I would maybe only say that, in looking at it, I do realize there's a distance away from Hall Road due to the flood zone. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that for putting a variance on the property to go that high. I know we've done it for, we've had other requests in the past, I believe. I know we've made variances for the size of the signage for that reason, but I don't remember doing one for the height of the building. That being said, I don't see the practical difficulty, in my opinion. I'll let anybody else come before I go ahead and maybe make a motion, but.
Any other comments or questions?
One more quick question.
Mr.
So this is like a side view. So would that tower that would be facing Hall Road, would that have the Mr. sign up on that extra height? Or is that the reason that you want that visibility?
Both the north and south elevation are proposed to have some signage, so yes.
I did have a question for the applicant. The grade of this parcel, you indicated that there is, obviously, we know there's areas in the front. There's a bridge, I believe,
Yes.
from the planning that's going to go over that. What's the grade relative to Hall Road?
To where the building is, I would have to reference that. I don't have that right in front of me. Plus, that it's still in, design. That wouldn't have been part of the initial site plan.
Understood. Mr. Van Tiffel, do you have any?
Yeah, there isn't much of a grade difference. The grade difference has to do with the floodplain and the drain itself.
Okay.
But if you get beyond the drain, it's relatively the same.
Okay, because to Mr. DeCoster's point, I believe we have in other places along Hall Road where the grade was substantially lower than Hall Road, we've looked at different heights for that reason. I think we've done that in maybe 2 instances, certainly at least 1. So, okay, very good. Any other comments from the board? And to the applicant, did you have any other comments? Obviously, we've had a little bit of conversation.
Sure.
Anything else you want to mention?
I guess depending on what you're going to discuss, I don't know if there's any ability to have some in-between condition, maybe factored on the distance to the road, somewhere between the 25 and 35, if 35 is not an acceptable height.
What is the, I guess I'll ask the question for the purposes of this. What is the distance from the road?
$250 feet, I believe.
Yeah, I would say that's roughly correct. I mean,
Yeah, it looks like
maybe
it's
a little bit more than that, but yeah.
Maybe 250 to the leading edge of the bridge. Mr. Van Tiffelen, I'm not sure that I have much familiarity with the exact dimensions of frontages on Hall Road. Do you have any comments on that frontage relative to other parcels? Obviously, this is a smaller use than maybe like a C2 or something that's got bigger signage, but any comments on that?
Not that specifically. I know that was one of the issues that came up in the conditional rezoning for this property, is the awkward shape that this property has because of the realignment of Garfield so that it can match up with Garfield and Clinton Township. There are utility poles on this property. There's the drain itself, the floodplain. It's a tough piece of property, and that's why I think it sat for as long as it did. And to create the parcels that this Mr. and some of the other facilities on this site would sit, conditional rezoning was the only way that was going to be able to be done.
Okay.
So,
Obviously, there was comments from the engineering department. I don't think you write those comments anymore. I know you used to. I would agree with Mr. DeCoster. I'm not sure that it's clear to me that there is a practical difficulty that I can see. Is there something that you would point out that maybe we might be missing here?
the only physical thing that I can see on this property is what was mentioned, is the floodplain, the drain, the wall. There's a knee wall that's in front of that keeps cars from going into the drain. But those are the only physical features that I could point to and say, you know, that might justify. And I don't know about the building itself, you know, a sign, you know, like I know we've looked at some billboards more recently where we've allowed those signs to go higher. But I don't think that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about the building itself and a feature that they associate with it, but it's not necessarily a sign.
The sign in and of itself, yes. Yes. Okay, very good, thank you. Any other comments or questions or motions?
Hearing none, I'll make a motion. It'll be to deny the variance request for section 10.1805B2 to request a building height increase from 25 to 35 feet.
All right, and if you could, Mr. Coster, just the reasoning on that?
I'm sorry, yes. I do not see a practical difficulty presented tonight.
Okay, all right. Is that sufficient?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. Motion by Mr. Coster, is there support?
I will second the motion.
Support by Mr. Piper. And I will call the roll unless there is any discussion on the motion. None? Okay. Mr. DeCoster?
Yes.
Mr. Piper?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzara?
Yes.
Mr. Tuckfield votes yes. Ms. Faustick?
Yes.
All right, that motion passes. I appreciate you coming in. Thank you. All right, that takes us back to item 8A, which I believe we had just the right time. If the applicant could come up and just give us any comments she has.
Hello,
Hello, welcome back.
it's Molly Smith again, on behalf of Hartford Communities, and we have made the decision to table this until
Okay.
February.
Very good. And that will be the first Thursday of February. I don't know what the exact date is. Probably verify that before we get into motions.
Thank you very much.
No problem. That would be the 6th of February,
Okay.
I believe. All right, with that, we actually, I believe, have to bring it off the table, so if I can have a motion to bring this item back onto the agenda.
I will make that motion, bring it back.
Motion by Mr. Piper, is there support?
Yeah, I'll support it.
Supported by Mr. Mazzara. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. All right, the item is now on the table, and I would now entertain a motion to postpone it to our regularly scheduled meeting on February the 6th.
I will make the motion to postpone it to the February 6th meeting at the petitioner's request.
Very good, and thank you for adding that, Mr. Piper. Is there support?
I'll support it.
Supported by Mr. Mazzara. All those, actually, I should say, any discussion? Good? Melissa, you good? Okay, all right. With no discussion then, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying nay. That motion passes. That item is postponed. Thank you. No problem. All right, that takes us on to public comments. Item 9. Is there any members of the public who'd like to speak tonight? If so, please come forward. State your name and address for the record and give any comments you might have.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Board. John Parkinson, 24261 Darwin Street, here in Macomb. I know item 7A has been quashed, but I have some questions with regards to 7A. I know they the petitioner withdrew their variance request. Was there a reason given, or is it just they just withdrew? And if so, are they still required to pull a variance request for a drive-through that close to the property without the call box per se? So I know at the last meeting we were talking about a call box with no speaker. If they decide to go that route, they didn't need a variance request, but they would still need to put the drive-through closer to the property line for that. So I want to know if they still need a variance for that. I know there's a planning date set up for that property as well, and I'll be here for that as well. But these are the questions I have, because I need to know ahead of time before I come to this planning meeting and understand what their next step is and what we have. We're not trying to stop them from building, obviously. We're just concerned about the noise as residents in Macomb Township, longtime residents of Macomb Township. I've lived in Macomb Township for over 20 years, 15 years at that particular residence. I, again, am the only colonial that backs up to that property. My bedroom is right there, overlooking that property. So I'm very concerned about what's going to be put there, how it's going to be put there. So naturally, I have those concerns. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. I would just mention to Mr. Parkinson, we didn't have any correspondence here. I would assume that the planning department might have more knowledge. I would feel free to call them. Melissa and Josh will be in the office. They probably can give you more details as to what they might be planning. For us, I believe that the variance request was specifically for a call box, not a drive-through. So I believe if there's no call box, that would be the variance request. And I believe there is also a variance that had been approved for the parcel, so I assume that if they redistributed the property and put it within the setbacks that were previous given, that also would not require variance. So I think that's with regards to the variance, and then I'm sure the planning department can help with any other questions on that before the next meeting. So, all right, with that, move on to ZBA member comments. Any comments from the board this evening?
I have none.
All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to the planning director comments. Melissa, any comments for you or Josh this evening?
No, not really. Just as we kind of mentioned earlier, nothing would be on the January meeting, so we would be seeing you guys next in February. So until then, just stay safe, have a good holiday. But that's it.
Sounds good. So just to confirm that, because my distraction, so we currently do not have a January meeting, and we're past requirements for timing.
Yes.
So, okay, very good. I think that was originally scheduled for like the second or third, too.
Yeah, the
Second,
second. It's
Probably
cutting
all-
it very close.
Very convenient.
All very happy that's probably the case. All right, sounds good. Any comments from our legal team this evening?
No further comments.
All right, sounds good. That takes us on to item 13, which is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Piper, is there support?
I'll support it.
Supported by Mr. Mazzara. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying nay, and that means at 7:10, we stand adjourned.